I used to think of home as a safe place, a haven. That was before Karen, before the HOA turned into a bureaucratic horror film, and before I realized how fragile peace is when it's in the hands of control freaks with laminated bylaws and too much time on their hands. It started 3 years before we finally escaped. Back then, my wife and I bought what we thought was our forever home. 2 stories, a quiet yard, a decent school district. Sure, it came with a homeowners association, but I was naive. I thought an HOA meant trimmed lawns and maybe a newsletter with cookie recipes, not psychological warfare. Karen introduced herself on day 2. About 45, platinum blonde bob, yoga pants so tight they looked structural, and a clipboard that probably had more authority in her mind than the U.S. Constitution. "Welcome to the community," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm the HOA president. We like to keep things orderly here." Orderly meant monthly fines for unauthorized wind chimes and non-standard mailbox paint. It meant passive-aggressive letters about yard conformity. But Karen didn't stop at rules. She wielded them like weapons. I wasn't her only target. I was just the loudest one. Over time, the pressure got worse. Our HOA dues mysteriously tripled over the course of a year, and every time I tried to bring it up at a meeting, Karen cut me off or pretended she didn't hear me. Once she fined us because our trash bins were out 30 minutes too early. Another time it was because my daughter drew chalk art on the driveway. I wish I were kidding. The real breaking point came one weekend when we were out of town visiting my parents. When we returned, the front door was unlocked, and it looked like someone had been snooping. Drawers cracked open, closets left ajar. I checked the cameras, and there she was, Karen herself, walking through her living room like she was flipping through clearance items at Target. I confronted her. She didn't deny it. She called it a surprise inspection prompted by anonymous complaints. She had no warrant, no permission, not even a courtesy call. She just walked into our house like she owned the deed. I hired a lawyer the next morning. Turns out I wasn't alone. Neighbors quietly shared similar stories. Fines that didn't match up, selective enforcement, Karen boosting dues for certain families while leaving her inner circle untouched. She ran the HOA like a dictatorship with potlucks and baked-in corruption. What she didn't expect was that I kept everything. Every notice, every fine, video footage, phone recordings, copies of HOA meeting minutes where my objections had been omitted. I wasn't just angry. I was prepared. The case took months. Karen strolled into court smug as hell, but when the judge saw footage of her in our living room and we revealed spreadsheets showing my dues quadrupled compared to neighbors, the tone changed. In the end, she was ordered to pay us $80,000 in damages for trespassing, harassment, and financial abuse. The HOA board, full of her minions, had no choice but to remove her pending reevaluation. She was also sentenced to community service. I heard she was made to clean park graffiti at the one place she'd once banned teens from skating in. Poetic, maybe, but the punishment felt light to me after years under her thumb. We sold the house a few weeks after the trial. There was nothing left for us there. We stayed with my parents while I worked extra hours, skipped vacations, and cut every corner to save. After almost a year of scrimping and planning, I found a place on the edge of the HOA line, a gorgeous, solid 2-story house with a modest pool and a big backyard where my kids could run without fear of a citation. We verified with the county records office, double, triple-checked, and confirmed it was not under HOA jurisdiction. Freedom had never tasted so good. Moving day felt like crossing a marathon finish line. A few close friends helped haul the furniture. My wife was already organizing the kitchen. The kids explored the upstairs. For the first time in a long time, it felt like we were building something real again, without fear of a notice on the door or an HOA rep with a clipboard. And then she arrived. I was unloading a bookshelf when a silver SUV crawled up the street and parked across from the house. The window rolled down. Sunglasses, blonde bob, lips pursed into that polite, artificial curve. It was Karen. Time stopped. She stepped out looking like nothing had happened, like she hadn't paid us $80,000, like she hadn't trespassed in our home. "Good morning," she chirped, walking up the driveway. "Welcome to the neighborhood." "I'm Karen." I didn't say a word. My friends stopped moving boxes. My wife peeked out the window. The air tightened like a thunderstorm about to break. Karen blinked, then tried to recover with a brittle smile. "What?" "Moving in," she asked. "This property belongs to the HOA," she claimed, gesturing vaguely down the street. I told her it didn't. I showed her the deed signed, notarized, and recorded. She hesitated, then lied. Actually, yes, it does. The HOA purchased it. I laughed out loud. Do you ever get tired of making things up? Her expression cracked, but only a little. She told me to stop unloading and vacate while they sort this out. I stepped forward, calm but close, and said, Karen, get in your car and leave. This is my property. She didn't explode. She smiled coldly, walked back to her car, sat there, and watched us for half an hour. At first, we ignored her and kept unloading, though everyone was on edge. Finally, I walked over and tapped her window. She rolled it down. Are you stalking me? I asked. Just monitoring a potential HOA violation, she replied smoothly, tapping her phone. I told her to leave or I'd call the police. She tilted her head and, as if on cue, a black and white patrol car rolled onto the street. I stepped back, blinking. The officers parked, stepped out, and Karen was on them like glitter on a birthday card, waving her phone and what I assumed were her documents. I stayed on the sidewalk and watched her perform. All calm and cooperative now, smiles and concerned neighbor tones. Then I heard my name and walked over. She was playing back a recording, my voice heated, telling her to get lost. She's recording me now. I said more to myself than anyone. Karen turned and gave me that same deadpan smile. The officer looked at me. Sir, can we see your ownership documents? Absolutely. I pulled the folder from my glove box. I brought it on purpose just in case, and handed it over. The officer stepped away with his partner to review them. Meanwhile, Karen stood tall, arms crossed, her phone still recording. You came here trying to intimidate me, I told her. Didn't work. You came here trying to claim this house. Didn't work. And now you're hoping to get a clip of me losing it on camera. Not today. The officer returned, brow furrowed. Sir, your documents look valid, but there's a discrepancy. Miss Bradshaw here also has ownership paperwork. We're going to have to take both of you downtown. It's possible one of these documents is falsified. Karen's smug little grin returned in full bloom. What she didn't realize was that I was already calling my lawyer on speaker. He answered on the first ring. Hey, Steve, I said, never breaking eye contact with Karen. Yeah, I'm heading to the station. The police station was sterile and over-air-conditioned, the kind of place where even the vending machines looked judgmental. I sat in a hard plastic chair with Karen across from me, fidgeting with her phone like she was trying to summon demons through a mobile app. Something about the whole situation reeked like a 2-day-old fish market behind a gas station. My lawyer Steve arrived within the hour. Sharp suit, sharper mind, the kind of guy who could quote state zoning laws the way most people quote movie lines. He reviewed Karen's folder, the so-called documents, and I could tell from his face she was in deeper than she realized. Her folder had county stamps and notary marks and looked legitimate at a glance, but Steve pointed out inconsistencies, wrong header fonts, a missing seal, and a signature from a notary who had died 3 years ago. My documentation, by contrast, was solid. Verified chain of ownership, original seller's signature, county clerk registration, everything squared up. Yet because her papers also looked official, detectives from the real estate fraud unit said we both had to remain available while they investigated. Karen sat there like a cat who'd just eaten a canary dipped in caviar. When I met her eyes, she actually winked. I didn't flinch. Steve leaned in and said quietly, I'm calling a contact at the assessor's office. This smells like inside help. He was right. By the next morning, fraud investigators had flagged Karen's sale as highly suspect. The LLC that sold the property to the HOA, a group called Civic Growth Partners, didn't exist in any state registry. Their listed office was a closed P.O. box in Nevada. The seller's phone number was a disconnected burner. It was a shell. Someone had funneled HOA funds, over $250,000, into a fake purchase. Either she'd been scammed, or she'd orchestrated it. Steve and I leaned heavily into the second theory. Then it got darker. Investigators found emails between Karen and a man named Joel, a mid-level official in the county assessor's office who had access to parcel records and ownership databases, the kind of access that could make fake paperwork seem real, at least for a little while. Joe and Karen went way back. In one email he wrote, "No one will check that border property. Just register it fast. It'll hold until next cycle." That was enough to trigger an internal review. Joe was suspended. Karen immediately spun the story to the HOA, claiming she'd been the victim of a real estate scam, conveniently omitting that she'd bypassed a board vote and spent $270,000 without approval to buy the property as a community asset, a guest house with a pool, sauna, and rec room. She framed herself as the victim. She cried on command. At first, the board ate it up, but cracks soon showed. A few residents who'd been quietly observing during our move-in began asking questions. Why hadn't there been a vote? Why were they only hearing about this now? Why had HOA funds dropped so drastically that quarter? I got an anonymous tip, a photo of an internal HOA financial statement showing a transfer of over $270,000 just days before Karen showed up at my driveway. Memo line reading, property acquisition, phase 1. That was all Steve needed. We filed an injunction against the HOA to prevent any further interference with my property. The judge approved it within 48 hours. No HOA official, resident, or representative could step foot on my property, attempt contact, or claim ownership in any form until the fraud investigation was complete. Still, my wife and I decided to hold off on fully moving in. We stayed part-time, using the house mostly for daytime unpacking and slow prep. The neighborhood felt tense, like everyone was waiting for something to blow. Karen's car began appearing in random places on the street, not directly across from the house, which would have violated the order, but just far enough to stay legal. I catch glimpses of her parked a few houses down, sipping coffee, scrolling through her phone, watching like a villain in a bad movie who hadn't realized her script was already being rewritten. Steve, on the other hand, was on fire. He started compiling a case not just against Karen, but against the HOA itself. Financial mismanagement, abuse of power, illegal property acquisition, conflict of interest, misuse of dues. This is bigger than just your house, he told me one night. She's been playing emperor for years. It's time we burn her little kingdom down. I agreed. We officially moved in a week after the injunction was granted. There were still boxes in the garage and curtains missing from half the windows, but it was ours. They had the deed, unquestionably theirs, but the relief was thin. The first nights in the new house felt unnervingly quiet, so they kept the property visible and monitored, for motion cameras covering everything. Threats began almost immediately. An anonymous envelope saying, "Get out while you still can," eggs on the garage, broken lawn lights, a trash bag of dead fish, petty vandalism that escalated into targeted harassment. One trespasser was caught on camera and arrested, but the real shock came when a flash drive appeared in their mailbox. Screenshots, recordings, and HOA chat logs showing board members, led by Karen, plotting to make life unbearable. Pressure makes people move, one admin wrote, another suggested sabotaging the pool. They turned the evidence over to their lawyer, who helped expand the case from an individual suit into a broad legal attack on the HOA itself, harassment, incitement, property damage, and more, and an emergency no-contact order barred implicated neighbors from approaching the property. But the attacks kept coming. Someone tried to poison the pool at 3 a.m., caught on camera and later tied back to HOA members. Then an attempted arson at the front door was foiled only because a motion cam captured the attacker's car. Arrests followed, and statements began to unravel Karen's network. Investigators uncovered a pattern of fraud and insider help, forged purchases, shell companies, a county assessor who'd manipulated records, and hundreds of thousands of dollars siphoned from HOA funds. A longtime lieutenant, Linda, handed over the HOA's real ledger, showing massive unexplained spending and a personal slush fund for Karen. The DA raided Karen's house. She resisted and was taken into custody. The HOA's bank accounts were frozen, leadership collapsed, and the community scrambled to salvage what it could. In court, the evidence was damning. Fake sales, chat logs, financial records, audio, and confessions. Karen faced charges ranging from conspiracy and fraud to incitement and reckless endangerment. Several board members were fined or faced prosecution. The judge ordered the HOA dissolved, funds seized and redistributed, and Karen was sentenced to prison with no early parole for at least 18 months. The plaintiff walked out of the courtroom legally vindicated and their home restored, but the victory felt complicated. The house still bore soot from the arson, recovery was ongoing, and restitution, just under $35,000, helped but didn't erase the damage. Over time, the neighborhood calmed. Life returned to routines, kids swimming, sunflowers planted, and the surveillance cameras that once felt like a necessity slowly took on the air of protective decor. They didn't get the full $80,000 Karen had been ordered to pay, but the restitution covered the essentials, a new front door, fresh paint, and that silly fireproof mailbox I joked about. The best part wasn't the check, though. It was a news headline I spotted one morning. Karen denied early release after getting punched during a prison altercation while trying to enforce her own version of cleanliness rules. I laughed so hard my coffee almost spilled. A few days later, Linda Carver showed up at our door with an apple pie, and an apology. She confessed that Karen had run the HOA like a cult, using fear, dirt, and favors to control people, and that many had been coerced into silence. Before she left, she told me we'd done more than reclaim a house. We'd torn down a rotten system. That night, we grilled on the patio, watched the kids swim, and toasted to quieter days. No fines, no forms, no Karen. While somewhere far away, Karen learned that prison doesn't bend to bylaws.